The world woke up to a moment that many analysts had quietly feared but hoped would never fully arrive. A major global crisis, long developing beneath the surface of diplomatic statements and guarded intelligence reports, had finally reached a point where it could no longer be ignored. Governments, institutions, markets, and ordinary citizens all felt the sudden shift. While the exact nature of the crisis was complex, involving overlapping political, economic, and security dimensions, one fact became immediately clear: global stability was under serious pressure, and world leaders were being forced to respond in real time, under intense public and international scrutiny. In the early hours following the first confirmed developments, statements began pouring in from capitals across the globe. Presidents, prime ministers, foreign ministers, and spokespersons addressed their nations, each choosing words carefully, aware that a single phrase could influence markets, alliances, or public sentiment. The tone varied from cautious concern to firm resolve, but beneath the surface, a shared anxiety was evident. This was not a localized issue that could be managed quietly. It was a crisis with global implications, capable of reshaping international relations for years to come. The leader of one of the world's most influential nations was among the first to speak publicly. Addressing the nation from an official residence, the message emphasized unity, calm, and preparedness. The leader acknowledged the seriousness of the situation, while assuring citizens that all necessary measures were being taken in coordination with international partners. Behind the scenes, emergency meetings were already underway, involving military advisors, economic strategists, and intelligence officials. The aim was clear: assess the scope of the crisis, prevent escalation, and protect national interests without triggering unintended consequences. Across the Atlantic, European leaders held urgent consultations. In several capitals, emergency cabinets were convened, and parliamentary sessions were either delayed or hastily reorganized to accommodate the rapidly changing situation. European responses highlighted a strong preference for diplomacy and multilateral action. Statements emphasized the importance of international law, dialogue, and cooperation, reflecting both historical experience and the region's deep economic interconnectedness with the rest of the world. Yet even as leaders spoke of peace and stability, preparations were being made for potential disruptions, particularly in energy supply chains, financial markets, and cross-border security. In Asia, reactions were swift and carefully calibrated. Major regional powers issued statements that balanced concern with strategic restraint. Some leaders called for immediate de-escalation and offered to act as mediators, while others focused on safeguarding regional stability and economic continuity. The crisis posed unique challenges for Asia, given the region's role as a global manufacturing hub and its dependence on international trade routes. Even minor disruptions could have cascading effects, and leaders were keenly aware of how closely global markets were watching their responses. Middle Eastern leaders, accustomed to navigating complex geopolitical environments, responded with a mix of caution and urgency. Several governments called for emergency regional dialogues, recognizing that instability elsewhere often has direct repercussions in their region. Energy-producing nations paid particular attention to market reactions, aware that sudden price fluctuations could both benefit and harm their economies. Public messaging emphasized responsibility and restraint, while diplomatic channels worked quietly to assess how the crisis might alter existing alliances and rivalries. In Africa and Latin America, leaders expressed concern about the broader economic fallout. Many countries in these regions are particularly vulnerable to global shocks, especially those related to food prices, fuel costs, and currency stability. Statements from these governments often highlighted the need for international solidarity and support, urging major powers to consider the wider consequences of their actions. There was a strong sense that while the crisis might originate far from their borders, its effects would inevitably reach their populations. International organizations quickly moved to the center of the response. Emergency sessions were convened, bringing together representatives from dozens of nations. Speeches delivered in these forums reflected a wide range of perspectives, but a common theme emerged: the recognition that unilateral actions could worsen the situation. Calls for transparency, communication, and adherence to established norms dominated the discussions. Behind closed doors, intense negotiations took place, with diplomats working long hours to draft statements, resolutions, and contingency plans. Financial markets reacted almost immediately. Stock indices fluctuated sharply, currencies experienced sudden shifts, and commodity prices moved in response to speculation and uncertainty. Central banks issued brief statements aimed at reassuring investors and signaling readiness to intervene if necessary. Economic leaders understood that confidence was fragile, and even rumors could trigger significant market movements. World leaders, therefore, faced the dual challenge of managing the crisis itself while also stabilizing public and investor confidence. Media coverage played a significant role in shaping public perception. News outlets around the world provided continuous updates, often relying on limited information and expert analysis. Social media amplified every statement, rumor, and image, accelerating the spread of both facts and misinformation. World leaders had to navigate this environment carefully, knowing that their words could be taken out of context or misinterpreted within minutes. Communication strategies became as important as policy decisions, with governments striving to appear transparent, decisive, and calm. Public reactions varied widely. In some countries, citizens expressed anxiety and frustration, questioning how the crisis might affect their daily lives. In others, there were calls for strong action, reflecting long-standing political sentiments or historical grievances. Protests, debates, and public forums emerged as people sought to understand the situation and influence their government's responses. Leaders found themselves balancing domestic pressures with international responsibilities, a task made more difficult by the speed at which events were unfolding. As the days progressed, it became clear that the crisis was not a single event, but a series of interconnected challenges. Political tensions fed into economic uncertainty, which in turn influenced security calculations. World leaders held frequent phone calls, virtual summits, and in-person meetings, often releasing carefully worded summaries afterward. These communications revealed both cooperation and disagreement, highlighting the complexity of aligning diverse national interests in a time of global stress. Some leaders adopted a firm stance, emphasizing deterrence and preparedness. They argued that showing strength was essential to preventing further escalation. Military exercises were adjusted, the end like and comment for Part 2.